Awesome. We welcome you to our webinar today, Creating Equity-Minded Online Tutoring Sessions. You're already amazing online tutors. Now what? Let's make your online sessions equity-minded. So thank you again for taking this time out of your busy schedules to join us. We're hoping more of our colleagues will join us as they trickle in to the webinar. We will go ahead and get started. So today our goal is to first get to know each other. So I invite you all to please introduce yourselves in the chat. Nice way to kind of figure out who's in the room, who's with us today. Some of your colleagues might be here with you. It's a nice opportunity to connect. We're going to have an awesome activity, so don't worry. I know we started off the PowerPoint asking everyone to mute themselves and to please, keep that off until we begin our activities. We'll invite you to participate. We just don't want to talk over each other. We don't want to miss any of the information today, so we just invite you to keep your mics off for now, but don't worry. You'll get a chance to participate and collaborate with each other. We're going to go, we'll dive into the presentation, and then again, we'll break out into an activity. At that point, our second activity, we will put you into breakout rooms and you'll get to collaborate, okay? And then we'll talk a little bit about CVC resources. We will then provide a few minutes for Q&A. And then lastly, we'll wrap it up, providing some next steps. We'll provide you a survey. And of course, provide some appreciation around everything that we're collaborating and sharing today. So I'll start off by introducing myself. So I'm Jessica Hurtado, and I'm the program supervisor for the CVC OEI. I am specifically working with the student experience division. So I have the pleasure of working with the online ecosystem tools. With that includes online tutoring. So I've been working closely with my colleagues. They will introduce themselves in a few minutes. To bring this together and to really provide opportunities to talk about the support and the resources that are needed in online education, and how do we help our students feel connected and supported in this new way of learning. And so today, again, you're here to learn a bit more about the importance of equity, right, in your everyday practice. And so nice to meet you all. And now I'll hand it over to my colleague, Karen, so she can introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Karen A, and I am very happy to be here. I am the program coordinator for student experience, and I work closely with Arnita and Jessica in helping with the online college counseling courses. I also have been teaching part-time anthropology at a variety of different community colleges, and love to learn about the equity component and bringing that into my classes. So I'm always learning, and really happy to be a part of the program with the CVC OEI.
Awesome. And I'll introduce Dr. Arnita Porter.
Hello, I am Arnita, and I'm so happy to be with you all today. I'm really excited about this session. I've been teaching in the California Community College system for about 15 years. I teach in the Los Angeles Community College District, as well as the Mount San Jacinto District. And I also work with OEI, with CVC OEI as the online student equity specialist. I guess that's the way to say it. But at any rate, I love tutors. And so I'm really excited about being here with you all today. So that being said, let's get into what our goals are for today. Main thing is we want to, again, provide an overview of equity-based tutoring. We believe that tutoring is equity in action. And so we're going to focus today on how do we make sure we equitize our online tutoring sessions. We're going to discuss equity-minded strategies that support and enhance the valuable service that you already provide. And we'll look at how your practice can connect to your college's student success goals, how it can be in alignment with those goals, as well as we'll have you participate in a couple of activities surrounding equitizing your sessions. So, but before we jump into a lot of the content that we have for you today, how about we just take a moment to check in? We want to know how you're feeling, how are you doing? We know that there's been a lot happening in the world. Seems to be a new major occurrence every day that throws us off of our balance. And you know, we're struggling to find time or ways to just keep breathing and keep going. So we want to know how you're doing and how are you impacted by our system being transitioned fully to the online learning environment. And, you know, with COVID, the racial uprisings, we've had the fires. We want to know what challenges you're experiencing. And also, we like to know what is it that, despite all of these occurrences, what is it that we can celebrate about you? So take a moment and you can think about it, put some information in the chat. Let's see, let's get a temperature.
Sounds like it'd be easier just to say something rather than type it.
Well, if that's easier for you, then we are definitely open to that as well. Everyone may not be as comfortable speaking right out. So, you know, if you want to share with the group, go right ahead.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Isidro Magana. I live in Tulare County. I don't know where most of you are from, but you know, you asked a few questions that, you know, strike a nerve in most of us, especially because of what we've seen on television. But you know, I really want to focus on how some of the positive things that I've seen from this whole pandemic. It kind of reminds me of September 11, 2001. You know, when my wife and I, we went to visit in New York. It seemed like everyone was very helpful. You know, after the attack, you know, there was you could just feel it everywhere. You know, everyone was very helpful. If you needed some help, you know, with directions, or, you know, I almost felt as if I had dropped my wallet, someone would have tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, sir, you dropped your wallet." And it was that kindness everywhere, which is similar to what it feels like today, especially, you know, with so many people being or having access to food. You know, the government has really stepped it up and provided food for everyone, you know, without any questions. You know, you can go to a church, you can go to a school, you can go to, you know, there's a lot of places and get food for free, you know, and that by itself is, you know, something that I've seen that is really positive, how the community has, you know, joined together to be able to do that, you know, to help one another, to help each other. And you know, and another thing is the ability that the government has implemented, you know, to be able to get assistance medically, you know, through the telehealth, telemedicine. And you know, I didn't experience it personally, but I saw my wife's aunt. You know, we had gone to visit her a few months back, and she excused herself because she had a doctor appointment. And then I saw on her cell phone where she was talking to her doctor, and I thought that was really cool, you know. And I remember that scene because I had to go to the emergency room some months after that, and there was only 2 people in the ER, which was very strange. I felt like, you know, someone had taken everyone out of the ER and dropped them off somewhere, because, you know, my experience is, you know, has been where if you go to the ER, there's going to be, you know, tons of people, and your wait's going to be
right
10 hours. So
right
that's another thing that I noticed, you know, that because of all the things that have happened, you know, the government has really stepped it up and provided these things. I was able to be seen within 15 minutes, you know, and
right, and
that,
we know that that's pretty much unheard of when we're in quote unquote normal circumstances. And so I just want to touch back on a couple of things that you said, focusing on positivity and community, which is a wonderful thing, that when crisis does occur and trauma does occur, that you know, we have a history of rallying around one another and supporting one another, even in the midst of the quote unquote trials and tribulations that we also see happening. So it's good to know that, you know, positivity is definitely occurring. We know that there are food insecurities. And so the fact that food is widely available in a way that hasn't been before. And the beautiful thing about this is it's showing us what can be done. Right? So why can't this be something that is ongoing? Because we know that it's possible. Some of the other things that have been mentioned is sadness. Some of you have mentioned that you're experiencing sadness, that transitioning to online learning has been exhausting. And it's difficult to, I think this is Brandy saying that it's been difficult to coordinate a large number of student tutors remotely, and access, right? That's one of the biggest challenges, getting students access to the online tutoring system. Okay, what else do we have here? Anyone else like to speak up as I scroll through the chat? Separation of work and home. Yeah, I get that.
I would say the hardest thing that's been for me is that I worked on a very busy floor with hundreds of students milling through and learning happening and listening to amazing conversations, and this I couldn't wait to go to work every day. It was so stimulating and wonderful and so community-based. And the hardest thing for me has been sitting in a room staring at a computer, which is not my jam. And I'm making all the changes that I need to do, and we're trying to make it as community-based as possible. But sitting and looking at a computer without the student base and without all that wonderful learning happening, it's challenging. I want to show up to work every day. I do it because I'm grateful that I have a job. Yeah. But I think the hardest thing is this is so different, and so different than what I was used to previously. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that, Deb. Anyone else?
I would like to say hello, everyone. I'm Farial Saeed from American for College. I oversee a tutoring center called the Student Services Resource Center, and it is one of the tutoring programs at American for College in Sacramento. We serve categorical students, EOBNS Care, CalWorks, Next Up, Veterans, DSBNS, and I agree with everybody. It's really been a challenge, but you know, it is very hard when you have your own challenges of separation of work and home, learning new techniques, you know, developing new strategies, how to meet student needs, and it is not easy. But I think I'm grateful. We're a great campus that work together, especially the student services side. We work together very closely so we can support one another and also support our students. So it is a challenge, but it's going, at least it's working for now. So thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think, yeah, the biggest thing is missing our students as well as missing our colleagues. We're missing being in community with one another. Um, we're missing the ability to leave our homes and go to our wonderful jobs. Now everything is just done sitting here in front of a computer. I know I experience anxiety now whenever I'm away from my computer, which is, something that I'm definitely struggling with. Anyone else before we move on?
Well, I'm going to weigh in. I just joined late, so I haven't heard everybody, but I'm up here in Eureka, which is a very rural area if you're not familiar with the northwest corner of the state. And everything that everybody else has said has been true up here for the most part. And although I've actually been going on to campus pretty much, several times a week because
how does that feel?
I'm usually for most of the summer until about the beginning of August, I was literally the only one in the building, in the entire learning center for most of that time. But I was doing that because I'm in a good situation to go in and pass out the computers and the equipment and stuff. I'm also the director of the library. And so I could do that rather than subject my staff to coming in, and many of them were in situations where that wouldn't have been as safe for them. But the biggest challenge that I'm facing right now is simply getting tutors, because we're very rural. And so we depend to attract people into tutoring. We relied heavily on the students coming into the learning center, being able to communicate with them, being able to communicate with faculty and have them refer us students. And we've also had a over 100% staff turnover in our tutoring area since a year ago, July.
Wow.
It started before the pandemic, but it was accelerated afterwards because of circumstances totally unrelated to the pandemic. It just played out that way. So we also lost our institutional memory in that department. And so I have one classified staff person. Fortunately, she's qualified to tutor in mathematics, and I have one volunteer who's a former faculty who's tutoring in chemistry. And then I've got faculty writing tutors, and that's pretty much all we're doing right now. So if it weren't for the STAR consortium, we'd be really suffering.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Catherine.
Can I interject something that Catherine said?
Who's that?
One thing that we do at our school, at the community college that I attend, the students are volunteers. Actually, I'm sorry, they're paid employees by the school to mentor, tutor. There's also, they use pass leaders is another title that is given to the students. So these are students that have already completed the course and got a good grade, and the teachers or the professors signed off, that they wanted them to help and assist, the next semester in whatever category. So whether it be calculus 3 or chemistry or anthropology or physiology, whatever the subject was, there's like 27 different tutors. And then there's the past tutors.
Is that something that can be looked, sorry to interrupt you, but I was just wondering if that's something that can be looked at, Catherine. Past leaders, past students,
we do that.
From that pool.
We do that, but many of the courses that need tutoring the most are courses that are taken typically by students in their last semester at the school. So, the capstone courses or the ones that they've been delaying until right before they need them to graduate. So no, we do that. We do that. It's just challenging.
And it's challenging even with online tutoring?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We're a relatively small school, and we're very, like I said, very rural.
Right.
Lots of students without connectivity. Lots of all those challenges.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, that's a thread that carries through this issue with connection and connectivity, really, and bandwidth, you know, not having access to technology, not having access to internet service. If they do have access, then it's issues around bandwidth. So, and that can be rural, that can be city. It just, you know, it's happening all over. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. And Isidro just mentioned that the school provides a hotspot. Yeah, that's something that's really, really great. I think most schools do, and they're inviting students to come to the parking lot. But what about those students who don't drive or who have a very long distance to go? And, you know, in the past, they've been able to go to cafes and coffee shops and libraries and things like that. But those things really aren't available anymore. And so we're having to reimagine how we do this and how we're providing the support services to our students. I really want to thank you all for sharing. That was really, really engaging, just what you all are experiencing, how you're feeling. I think across the board, we're all kind of experiencing issues around finding tutors, dealing with internet access, technical issues, lack of laptops. You know, some schools have provided, many schools have provided Chromebooks, but then they run out. And so there's a lot of issues that we're grappling with. So, but I want to also reach back to the comment earlier about celebrating the positivity that we're experiencing also. And I think if we can find ways to hang on to that in the midst of all of this, find the ways, find things that bring you joy, even the little things. The other day I just bought some tulips and they made me so happy. But it's the little things that, you know, help us to hang on and to grow through these challenges. So that being said, how about we start looking at this notion of equity? I think with respect to equity and equality, we pretty much have a good definition of what equity is. We know that if you look at the graphic here, equality, just based upon this graphic, everyone has a bicycle, right? So everyone's equal in that respect. However, equity speaks more to the state of being just and fair, and it's synonymous with justice. And the goal, I think, is to see how we can continue to do this work systemically and structurally. How can we embed equity-minded practices in our tutoring sessions, in our tutoring centers, in the work that we do on a daily basis, so that it becomes, you know, just the norm. It's systemic, and we use these practices to help us address the learning barriers and the systemic barriers that are in place as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the things about equity, I love this slide because it focuses on, you know, this notion of I'm not taking your pie, right? If I need equity-minded services or practices, it's about giving everyone access to the ingredients, you know, giving them the skills to make their own pie, not necessarily taking someone else's, because that builds resentment. But how do we empower our students to increase their learning so that they have the skills necessary to make their own pie? Next slide, please. So again, we're looking at how do we embed our equity-minded practices, equity-based practices, culturally responsive practices. How do we take these student-centered practices and embed them in what we do on a daily basis? And how do we sustain this? Next slide, please. So I'd like for you to take a moment, check out this image, and put in the chat what this image represents to you. Take a couple of moments, think about it, and drop your comments in the chat. And for those of you that would like to speak up, feel free to do that as well.
For me, the first thought that comes to mind is, those hands are the hands of God that are sustaining all of us, and the bridge, well, that's life. As we journey through life, God's always there helping us. He's carrying us, he's providing the bridge so that we can get to where we need to go.
Wonderful.
And it's up to us to decide if we want to continue walking the bridge or if we want to jump off along the way.
Wonderful. Oh, I like this, helping hands. Together, anything can be possible. Mary said that. Wow. Deb said we can't get through without others. Yes. Sarah, provision on the pathway. For y'all, together we can fix the bridge for our students and with one another. Wonderful. Carla, the bridge looks like it's going to fall, but it's actually supported. Yeah. Okay, Catherine, we all need support to get where we need to go. Absolutely. Community, yes, we keep coming back to this theme of community. Yes, how essential it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else care to chime in? All right, then I say we move forward. Okay, so given the image that we just looked at and commented on and shared our thoughts around, let's take a moment and turn this on our sessions. Just want to check in with you about what your process is. How do you prepare? And how do you create an environment that's learning-centered and student-centered? Also, are your sessions, approachable? What do they look like? Are you approachable? Is your content relatable? How about welcoming? Can you go to the next slide, please? How about welcoming? Is the environment welcoming? Are you welcoming? And do you even think about what is the experience you'd like for your students to have during the session with you? And how do you want them to feel when they leave your session? Next slide, please. I love this quote from Dr. Maya Angelou. She says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so I want you to think about this in terms of, again, with your sessions, are you thinking in advance? What do you want your students' experience to be? What do you want your tutees, what do you want them to feel like after they've had a session with you? Next slide. A lot of the work we do focuses on and is centered in the work of Dr. John Powell. He's with the Othering and Belonging Institute. And I just happen to have on my shirt here from the Othering and Belonging Institute. But he has this wonderful book called Racing to Justice, where he focuses on these questions around othering and belonging, these notions around othering and belonging. And what does it mean to belong? And what does it mean to not belong? And who gets to belong? And what does that feel like? And how are people accepted? And what experiences are they having when they're, or when we're in community with one another? And we know that there are certain things that happen, we can see it today in terms of this notion of othering. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So with respect to othering, this focuses on denying someone's full humanity based upon thoughts or groupthink that a certain group is less than or a threat to the dominant culture or the dominant group. And so when you look at this Wordle on the right side of your screen, there are words that pop up that focus on othering, like dehumanization, discrimination, prejudice, objectifying, stereotype, racism, disgust. A lot of these things we're seeing happening right now in society, even though we can also still see the positive things are happening, but we know that there's a lot of fear that's happening right now. And our students are feeling this. We're feeling it as well, but our students are definitely feeling it. And so when we look at this notion of othering, we have to look at how do we get past that? How do we make sure that the work that we're doing when we engage with our students, that we're not participating in activities sometimes unknowingly, like unconscious bias, things of that nature. How do we make sure that we're not othering our students who come to us feeling very vulnerable and needing our support? So a lot of times when we think of othering, people think, well, I'll just treat everybody the same. But the thing about equity is that it's not about the same treatment. It focuses more on what is it that that individual student needs? What is it that that individual person needs in that moment to get them to the other side, right? To get them to success, to get them to where they're reaching their goals. So the opposite of othering is not saming. The opposite of othering is belonging. Next slide, please. So how do we create an environment where belonging is centered? So Dr. Powell speaks to belonging as being fundamental to our sense of happiness and well-being. And there's a lot of information now going around on campuses and in the college dialogues where they're talking about creating a sense of belonging. But I maintain that it's not about having a sense of it. It's either you belong or you don't. And so a sense of something can change from moment to moment. But when belonging is institutionalized, when belonging is systemic, then that means everyone is a part of the collective we, as Dr. Powell speaks to. And belonging speaks to how do we fit into a group or a place, and how welcoming is that place, as well as do we feel included, and are there policies and practices in place that support us being included? And we've been mentioning this word community. It's been coming up a lot so far in our discussion. And so that's the thing about belonging. Are we creating community or workplace or a specific culture around tutoring that's centered in belonging with equity-minded practices? We'll move to the next slide, please. So let's look at the language of othering, because words are very powerful. And if we refer back to the slide where the Wordle was, where there are words about dehumanization, discrimination, racism, things of that nature, how do we look at the language that we use and put an equity lens on the language? Because again, the language that we use, the terms that we use, it creates a feeling tone, but it also sends a message. And so what do we want, again, what do we want our students to feel like? And what type of experiences do we want them to have when they're engaging in our tutoring sessions? So we have to look at the language The language of othering sets up this dynamic of us versus them, right? It's, again, it goes back to looking at who is not centered, who is not welcome, who is not included. And so I know that you all have not used any language around othering. I know that doesn't happen with you all, but I'm sure you've probably heard some things in meetings or just in general. You may have seen certain language in policies. And so I want you to just take a moment and put in the chat. Next slide, please. Take a moment and put in the chat some words that you have heard that speaks to othering. So for instance, our students are unprepared or low income or not college material, or they can't learn, or they just come here to get a check. What are the ways that we other our students? Or they're just not smart, they're not intelligent, they just don't seem to be able to understand math, or they can't speak well, things of that nature. So take a moment and put some of those terms that you've heard. Again, we know that you haven't used them, but take a moment and enter that in the chat for us, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, Dev Ed students. Lazy and entitled. Yes. Disengaged. Okay. Anything else? Come on, y'all. I know you've heard way more than that. Let's put it in the chat. Foreign students, okay. Okay, hard workers. Okay, that's a good point, Catherine. Implies that they have to work harder to succeed. Okay.
You know, I haven't really heard derogatory comments, you know, as you're suggesting. Maybe I wasn't paying attention.
Not necessarily derogatory. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the intention, but the language that's used in institutions that we use to describe our students are often derogatory, even though that may not necessarily be the intent. It's used, certain words are used to just create these descriptors so that we'll know what type of students we're talking about. Like non-traditional, right? Deficits, okay? Go ahead, Isidro.
Yeah, you know, I just wanted to comment that, you know, in my experience, you know, I've only gotten to see, there might be things that I didn't see, but I've only gotten to see positive, and that's from every part of the school, from the staff to the students, even the janitor. You know, I'm a very social person, so I like to approach and talk to everyone. And so even in my conversations with the janitors, you know, as they're cleaning the, you know, a restroom or one of the classrooms, or even just, you know.
Where you at? What school?
I attend Porterville College. And
well, let's give it up for Porterville, because that's wonderful that everyone, great. Thank you, Deb. Yes.
I'd echo that, because I really struck, that's why I made the comment about good terms being othering, because really, I don't think I've heard anybody from the top to the bottom at my school talk about students in ways that I would consider othering. There's a culture of inclusiveness and a culture of recognizing all the different ways, or trying to recognize, I don't know that we succeed, but trying to recognize all the different ways that students who students may fit into different categories because the intersectionality is recognized. You know, one student might be white, but she's a single mother and, you know, didn't do so well in high school. And another student might be Black, but coming in from a, you know, with a better than average GPA and so forth. You know, it really depends on the individual student. So
I think you're right. It does depend on individual students. But I think collectively, when we look at the language, I'm so happy to hear that you all are having these positive experiences, because I think that's also evidence of the work that's being done around equity and intersectionality that folks are now starting to recognize. I also think that the beautiful thing about with all of the colleges now, having to have an equity plan, and the funding has been in place to support those plans, then you have a different approach now where where institutions are looking at student demographics, seeing where the gaps are, identifying those gaps, and then looking to see what activities, what work can be done, what policies can be implemented, what behaviors can be shifted, including language, and how do we put forth this not only appearance of being equity-minded, but really doing the work and looking to sustain this work over time so that it's deep and wide and entrenched and institutionalized. And I think that that's one of the things that has been really great about our student equity plans. And I'm so grateful for the funding, and we pray that it continues, because we also know that there is starting to be pushback in some areas around equity and inclusion. And so we hope that that doesn't carry over into the work that, you know, so many of you all and all of us have been in the trenches doing. Can we move on to the next slide, please?
Yeah, before you do, I just want to make one quick comment. As a student, I think that the students are more able to adapt to the current learning situation than the instructors, you know, because we're
not
still
finding that to be the case. If we look overall, we're finding that students are really struggling, and some
Well,
are.
I agree with that. I agree that there are students that have challenges, you know,
No, the
because they already
majority of our
have them.
students in the community college system, the data shows that the majority of our students are really struggling with moving to fully online. Those that have been online, they're pretty much able to roll with it, just like instructors who have been teaching online, or tutors that have been tutoring online. They're pretty much able to just roll with it. But that's not the majority of.
Right. Yeah, because I had a microbiology professor who about had a heart attack, you know, with having to deal with this new learning environment. In fact, she didn't continue the class, you know, because
That's happening.
Yeah. You know, and she's, you know, she's very intelligent, you know, I mean, she's been teaching microbiology for a long time.
Yeah. And we know that it's not about intelligence. We know that it's about not being comfortable having to suddenly operate in a new way and learn some new systems and ways of sharing the information that we share on a daily basis in the classroom. And so the thing that has been interesting for me to witness, and a lot of us, is that instructors are now feeling what students have been feeling all along. And so now that seems to make folks more equity minded, because now everybody needs everybody else to be equity minded, because we're not comfortable in the online environment. We don't know how to, we may not have had Canvas shells We may not have used a learning management system. And if we had it, it wasn't something that we were doing all the time. So that means that, you know, tutors, instructors, SI leaders weren't necessarily comfortable in the online environment. And students who would prefer being on a college campus have also been really struggling with having to move fully online. And so again, we look at some of the things that has been occurring that have really exacerbated the issues that we've been dealing with. We know that a lot of our students weren't, how can I say this? A lot of our students were not successful in their efforts, right? We can look at our numbers and we can see what our success rate numbers are. And we know that there have been some issues, which is why we needed the equity plans in the first place, because we saw that certain demographics, students were not doing so well. And so how do we step up what we do in terms of being tutors? How do we make sure that we help to bridge that gap and help students meet their success goals? But we find that things have been heightened and exacerbated when we're looking at the uprisings that have happened, when we're looking at COVID and the, you know, health disparities, and again, fires. We just had an earthquake, right? There have been so many things, and there's a lot of fatigue. Next slide, please. And so the again, we look at have been facing. And so how do we become more equity minded? How do we equitize our sessions so that we can help address some of these issues that are now even more pronounced as a result of COVID and the other things that are happening? So if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So earlier we asked how you all were doing, but now let's take a look at how our students are doing. This study was done by Education Trust West. And if you're not familiar with Education Trust West, they do a lot of work focused on equity and how are we helping to support our students in education in the state of California. It's a national organization, but here in California, we have Education Trust West. And so they took this survey. They wanted to take the temperature of how students are doing in California. And as you can see here, 3 out of 4 California college students are concerned about being on track to graduate. Those concerns are even higher for students of color. They're facing severe financial insecurity because of the pandemic. And, you know, students were hoping that by fall, a lot of these issues would have been dealt with, but we can see that things have just rolled on into the fall semester. And now we're looking at next year in terms of spring 2021 also being fully online. Next slide, please. So this is some great information in terms of our students basically showing the gap between their needs and the existing supports that are in place. So for instance, 87% of the students saying that it would be helpful if there were virtual office hours or other ways to connect with faculty. Or 78% said food support, you know, like access to food pantries. And as was noted before, we've seen, you know, those efforts stepped up. Mental health services, the anxiety that students are feeling now, the fear that they're feeling has led to an increase in the need for mental health services and counseling and emotional support. And so 78% of the students say that it would be, 76% say that it would be helpful for that, but schools are doing around 35% of that. So we have to look again at where these gaps are and what can we do in our daily practice to work towards eliminating those gaps. Next slide, please.
You know, the slide that you just went through, can you go back to it real quick? You know, our school I'm really thankful because it makes it easy. They do offer a virtual environment, and I'm sure, you know, all the schools or most of the schools across the country are
Yeah,
having to do that.
we all have to have a virtual
Uh,
environment now. It's by mandate. Yeah.
you know, I see, you know, I tutor for several professors, and you know, I see that, you know, some of them even make themselves available, you know, after office hours, you know, into the night, you know, helping the students to prepare for
Yeah.
a quiz or an upcoming test. You know,
Yeah.
at 9 o'clock, you know, they'll send an email, 9 p.m. Okay, for 30 minutes, we're gonna, you know, have a live Zoom, and anybody who wants to study, you know, so just making that available for the students is really good, because, you know, it gives them the opportunity to be able to get that extra help. So
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that we know is that when instructors and tutors are, and I consider tutors to be teachers as well, but when we are more engaged with our students, when we go above and beyond, of course, it helps our students, especially in times like this where things are so, well, they feel so unstable because we're in new territory here and it all hasn't been worked out yet. So we're trying to find our way, but we're making, you know, there are going to be some bumps in the road. But one of the things is that I think we can all be very proud of is that we see evidence of instructors going above and beyond, tutors going above and beyond. But also, I think we have to take into account that we're exhausted too. And, you know, a lot of it, the work that we do, of course, is student-centered, but I don't want us to forget about, you know, the tutors and faculty and student support staff and student services and counselors. And, you know, everyone is exhausted, and everyone, we're trying to do the best that we can. And again, this is unknown territory. If we can move on to the next slide. This is unknown territory, but we're trying to make sure that we, again, keep looking at where these gaps are showing up. So for instance, again, I go back to the mental health crisis. Quote here, a student says the anxiety has gotten so bad that they've gotten severe panic attacks and that they're depressed. One student mentioned, I miss not living in constant fear. So these are some real concerns that our students are reporting: higher stress than normal, depression, mental health issues, concerned about their risk developing substance abuse or addiction during the pandemic. Again, we know that there are a lot of issues that our students are dealing with. Next slide, please. So students have been saying, when this survey was taken, students were again hoping that they could return to school in the fall, that there would be more support. But again, we're now in the fall, and we do see evidence of things stepping up, but still, although we're doing the best that we can, it's still not enough. Next slide, please. So as you all mentioned earlier, you're feeling disconnected. You miss your colleagues, you miss going to work, you miss your students. Students are feeling the same thing, feeling disconnected from key campus supports. Next slide, please. One of the other things that the Education Trust West is doing is that they're mapping the digital divide, because we're seeing that, of course, with all of the other issues that have taken place, we know that there's an issue around technology, around access to technology, as well as access to internet services. And so it's created, well, the digital divide was already there, but now that divide is widening. And so they did a study focusing on the digital divide in higher education, and looked at where are the areas where there's more support needed. So if you go to the next slide, please. So even though we're giving out Chromebooks, even though we're giving out hotspots, even though we're allowing our campuses to be hotspots where students can pull up to the parking lot, we're doing all of this, but we're still seeing that there is a need, that there are needs that are still not being met. And so the thing about this map is that it represents the most affected areas by the digital divide and the projected need. And so there's a lack of access, and these factors include the income level, students of color as well. Up to 32% of African Americans and 33% of Latinx students lack access to technology or internet services, English learners, students with disabilities, as well as youth who are experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. So we know that these, again, these issues, these factors are widening the gap that was already present for students within that demographic. So the question becomes, how do we, in what we do on a daily basis, how do we help to bridge those gaps? How do we help to address those gaps? And again, keeping in mind when we're just as exhausted, but we know that we're still committed to serving our students to the best of our abilities. And so we know that belonging matters to students. Belonging is linked to better academic, psychological, and health outcomes. And we know that when students feel that they belong, that they're included, that they're supported, this translates into better academic performance. Next slide, please. So I want to touch on ACLA, because ACLA has online tutoring standards, and the four tenets of those standards is infrastructure, meaningful engagement, training, assessment, and evaluation. And so I think that if we look at number 2, meaningful engagement, I think that focusing on meaningful engagement, how do we do that? What does that look like? What do we do to make sure that within this notion of meaningful engagement, we're embedding practices that are going to help students feel supported, feel connected, feel like they belong? So next slide, please. So again, what's working and how do we know? Next slide. Not sure if you all are familiar with the 6 success factors by the RMP group, but the RMP group did a study a few years back where they interviewed students, I think it was about 900 students, and they wanted to know from students' voices, what do you feel like? What do you experience when you feel that you're supported and successful? What happens? And what do you need to feel in order to, and what do you need to experience in your educational settings in order to be successful? And so 6 things bubble to the surface. Students said that they needed to feel directed. They needed to be focused. They needed to feel nurtured. They needed to be engaged. They needed to feel connected, and they needed to feel valued. Next slide, please. So if we look at these 6 success factors, right, and we look at the information that we have, the data from Education West, and we think about all that's happening right now in our world, on our campuses, we look at the digital mapping in terms of what's needed, who needs what. Maybe we can take a look at our sessions and think about how do we demonstrate equity-minded practices in our sessions? And what do we mean by equity-minded practices? So things like mindfulness, right? That's an equity-minded practice. Being mindful, being an active listener, right? Being a compassionate listener. And what about, the nurturing aspect? And what about the welcoming aspect. How are you setting your sessions up so that students feel welcomed, so that they feel like they're being heard? And how are we making sure that we're using language that is supportive and inclusive? But also other factors come into play, like being honest, being flexible, being patient, again, being a good listener, but also being professional. The other thing is demystifying your own experiences. How do you share your own experiences with students to let them know, you know, I've been there too. And these are some of the things that I did to overcome the challenges that I was experiencing. So how can you help them be a collaborator in their own learning, but providing your own information and your own stories to connect with theirs, so that you're in the moment, creating community, creating belonging, and creating that support that students need. And also, how are you teaching students how to learn, right? And what sources are you using? What resources are you using? And especially what resources are you using, or strategies or tools that help students feel more engaged? Are you meeting them where they are? Have you determined what type of learner they are? Do they need to see something? If so, what kind of instrument do you have, or what kind of tool do you use, so that you can demonstrate what students might need to see in the moment in real time? So some of these things that we want you to think about, and we're going to set up this activity for you all to have a breakout session to talk about these things. Is that okay with you all?
Yep, that's fine with me.
Okay. So next slide, please. So again, we want you to think about, how do you connect with students? How do you create belonging in your sessions? How do you make students feel welcoming? Understanding that all that students are dealing with right now, how are you helping to move them past that fear and that anxiety in the moment so that they can learn, right? And we know that when students are stressed out, when they're feeling vulnerable, when they're feeling unsupported, when they're hungry, when they may be unhoused, all of these issues are happening. When the technology doesn't work in the moment and they're feeling frustrated. What practices are you using to help students get through those moments so that they can learn and forward their lives? So we're going to break you up into groups, right, Jessica?
Yeah, they're broken up. What would you like the time to be? It's set for 15 minutes, so.
I think that's good.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to move everybody and click it now.
Thank you.
And Arnita, you're going into a room.
Okay. Got it. Am I going to float? How's that going to work?
No, I just assigned you to the first room.
Okay. All right, then I'll go to the first room.
Let's see.
Karen,
Yes.
I believe, as Stephanie said, that you can place her with whoever needs her services for closed captioning. I don't know if we have any specific request.
No, we haven't. So it looks like there's 3 people that are not assigned. Oh, so do you want to go into a room, Jessica?
I think I'll stay here.
Okay. I can set up a chat and ask.
Yeah, I see 3 people who haven't gone into their rooms.
So you and the captioner. Oh, as far as other individuals, Camellia.
So we
She's in
have-
Breakout.
Oh, okay.
She's assigned to room 3. She just has to check it.
So Camila Sanata Rodriguez, if you can hear us, you just have to click on the option to go into the breakout room 3, and then we have Brittany Cano and Jasmine Nevares. Are you guys seeing your room options?
I think they've left.
Okay. Do we pause the recording right now or no?
Yeah, let me pause.
So, wonderful. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good breakout session. Let's just take a quick moment to have some share outs. So how many groups did we have, Karen?
We had 5 groups with about 5 people in each group.
Okay, well, how about this? How about, if that's 5 minutes, let's make it a little less than 5. But if everybody, just one person from the group can just share out, you know, some of the main takeaways that you all talked about around equity-minded practices, maybe some challenges, and how you have worked on those challenges, worked on overcoming those challenges and helping students with your equity-minded practices. All right, group number 1, let's go. I think I was in group number 1. Was I in group number 1? I'm not talking. Who, Angelica, would you like to share?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, or Farima, okay. You as well. Yes, well, go ahead.
I shared, you know, how I wasn't really experienced, but this was a great learning opportunity for me. And we kind of just discussed some of if we had any challenges, especially, you know, with classes being changed to online, and pretty much.
Okay, great. Farima, would you like to chime in? No? Okay. Well, I'll just share that one of the things that came up that I thought was really meaningful was Farima discussed, she's tutors ESL, even though she also does science, you know, math, the whole 9. But students are missing having opportunities to talk with one another and engage with one another. And so she's finding that just talking to students and allowing them to have that time to speak in English with one another, that it's providing the support that they need so that they can learn the language and move forward on their educational path. So I think, you know, her offering sessions that are welcoming and supportive, it helps students to feel more comfortable so that they, you know, can move past their fears and those barriers that they're experiencing around just learning another language, and especially having to, you know, looking for employment in this country and needing to be able to be proficient, I guess, in terms of speaking English. So I thought that was really meaningful. And of course, I echo what Angelica said. So that's it for number 1. Number 2. Group 2. Who wants to speak up and share about your group?
I don't remember which group I was in, but I did hear that you know, two of the persons that were in our breakout room shared something.
Who's speaking? Who's speaking?
Isidro.
Oh, does anybody remember what group Isidro was in?
No, I don't remember. I was also in his group. My name's Beth, and I don't ever remember seeing a group number anywhere, I'm afraid.
It was breakout room 4.
Okay, so this is number 4 talking. Okay,
I'll step back so Beth can make a comment.
We just talked about how important it was to acknowledge the whole student when we begin a tutoring session, just like some of your slides had pointed out, you know, to give a student a chance to vent a little bit about what's going on, and how important it is to, you know, provide that space. And then we also talked about sharing like tips or tricks that we've experienced for learning new material or memorizing material, or, you know, organizing, you know, paper, whatever the tutoring session is about, that often sharing some of, you know, outside resources and different techniques can be helpful to acknowledge different learners and different ways of learning that can support students, you know. And especially now, we said, you know, it's not just the normal stress of school, it's now, you know, worldwide pandemic, you know, social unrest, and maybe more at home. It's not a safe place because everybody is home, and all those stressors and all those issues, there's nowhere to go. You either have to deal with them or fight it out, or, you know. And so there's so many things I think that students come with to a tutoring session, that sometimes you have to take a minute to sort of address all this other stuff to kind of clean it out, and then help them focus on what do we need to work on to help you, you know, make progress in whatever it is that you're stuck at the moment. And so
great. Thank you, Beth. That's perfect. Okay, so that's group number 4. Who's number 2 or number 3? Who's going? Catherine, are you?
Yep. No, I'm in group number 5.
Oh, okay.
Group
Well,
number
let's
5.
go.
But we spent some time talking about our own backgrounds and what we bring to tutoring from those backgrounds. ESL for some people, disability and learning disabilities awareness from mine. And one of the things, I brought it up, but there were several people who were echoing different aspects of it, is the importance of checking in with the students on what worked and what didn't, but not just in a general way, not just in saying, you know, was this a good tutoring session? You know, but specifically, and training the tutors who work with us to do this, specific questions like, did it work better for you when I diagrammed this than when I explained it verbally? Yes. You know, which helped you understand more? Because that helps the tutor to learn the student's learning style better, but it also helps give the student the metacognition, the meta terms to help understand how they learn, so that they can then go out and advocate for themselves with other tutors or with teachers and say, yeah, I learn better when you do things visually. Mm-hmm. Can you draw more diagrams? Or, you know, I understand it better when you speak it. You know, I don't get the symbols you put up on the board.
So it's teaching them to be advocates for themselves.
Right. But it's also helping the tutors get a better sense of the student's learning style. Yeah.
Yes. And their own feedback, you know, with what they're better, perhaps, in facilitating, right, for the students. So great stuff. Thank you, Catherine. All right, number 2 or number 3, who's up? Oh my goodness, we only have 2 minutes.
I'll go. I'm gonna just tag after her because Roseanne and I talked about tutor training and how important that is. And at Moorpark College, we bring in every student service to educate every single tutor on what we offer. So CARES Act, food pantry, health services. So every single tutor knows how to refer any student coming in. If they are having issues, they are aware of how to, somebody likes my background, how to, send that student to the right place to get the help they need to get over the obstacles so they can keep going on their path.
Yeah, that's awesome. Connecting with student support services is so necessary. Even with faculty, it's important for faculty to do that as well. And we advocate them putting all of that information in their syllabi and referring to it, you know, throughout the course as well. Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Who's next? And last but not least?
I think group 2 disappeared.
Okay. Anybody from group 2? All right. So again.
Good question.
Yes.
You know, our school is doing, actually Reagan, I posted her email earlier in the thread.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yep.
She's doing a campaign. The school is doing something, you know, creating like a general email for the school that we all log into. So this is something new that's going to be going, you know, implemented for the next semester. But she's running campaigns. So it's a system called Navigate. It's connected to Google Classroom. And so she's running a campaign, and basically the students, all the students at the school are receiving emails. An email where they can reply and make an appointment with the tutor, and the tutor will receive an email to their inbox, you know, in this Navigate software, and basically this campaign is reaching out to the students, and the students themselves are making an appointment with the tutor.
Oh, that's great. So that's the students, you know, again, advocating for their own needs, their support, what it is they need, but giving them the tools, like setting up the tools to help them advocate for themselves and reach out and contact someone who can assist them with whatever challenges they're having in a specific class. So that's great. Thank you so much.
It reminds me of the bridge that you show there.
Right.
There seems to be cracks or disconnects in the bridge. And somehow the students are not able to reach the tutors because they don't know how, or you know, maybe it's their first time in, you know, having to do this. And so that many of the students that I've come across are really struggling, and they didn't even know. In fact, several of the instructors, the professors, have clicked on the virtual learning center just to look and see what it's all about, because they themselves didn't even know.
Well, that's the point of
if they didn't know,
I was making earlier about how important it is for instructors to also be connected to student support services, so that, you know, everyone in the house is marching to the same drummer. Everyone knows what's available. Everyone knows how they can support students, because that's what we're here for, right? To support our students. And thank you so much, Isidro, because that brings us back to the bridge, right? It was a perfect segue. Remembering that you all are a bridge of support for our students. Think about that. Think about the experience that you want them to have, and think about how you can be intentional in creating that experience. What can you do to make sure that students can get past their fears or move through their fears or their anxiety or the things that they're experiencing, so that it doesn't create, you know, you're helping to remove those barriers to learning. Because when we're stressed out, when we're hungry, when we're homeless, when we're having all of these other issues, sometimes it's difficult for us to learn. And so you all are instrumental in helping students to bridge those experiences so that they can get to their learning and complete their educational goals. And so I just want to say thank you. I love Tutors. I think you all are the bomb.com, as they say. And Tutors helped me get through law school, so I am forever grateful. My daughter right now is at Virginia Tech, and she is using Tutors to help her with calculus, which I don't even remember her taking calculus, but that's a whole nother workshop. But I thank you all so much. Any last, Jessica, you want to say anything very quickly?
Yes. Thank you. I just want to jump in and again, also thank you for coming today. We did include in the chat a quick shout out. We are having the part 2 series of this conversation next week on October 22nd, 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. If you go to our cvc.edu website, you can find our events calendar and register for that webinar next week. And we're going to be talking about addressing different learning styles in the online tutoring environment. So please invite your colleagues. Also, we will connect with all of you who have participated today. We'll send out an email saying thank you for joining us, and we will include the slides, and also we'll let you know where you can access the recording for today's webinar. So again, thank you all for joining us. I know we're over time. If you have any questions regarding any of the current tools that CVC-OEI is providing your colleges, for example, NetTutor or Pisces, you can always send an email to support@cvc.edu for any information that you might need. I'm happy to connect with all of you. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your week.
And this was a great conversation. Thank you all so much. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Take care of yourselves.